Okay, I'm going through all my gear, so it's a wreck out here. Patrons. There's my dog LB over there, and my broom for sweeping up, which I obviously never do. Anyway, this is a Fender Tweed Champ. It's a classic small amplifier. It's tiny. I mean, it's like the size of a lunchbox for a big burly construction worker. This is a speaker cabinet that used to be an amp, a Sears Silvertone 1392. Now it houses a 12-inch speaker, a Celestion 4-ohm 12-inch vintage 30. And you can see it's got this jerry-rigged up wire connecting it to this Tweed Fender Champ. There's a blackface Fender Champ. That's another good friend of mine there. Another Sears amp that sounds amazing, a Fender Vibrolux. And the best of all, Fender Princeton Reverb from the 1970s. All these amps I use to try to get the sounds that are in my head. My latest right now favorite would be this. And this is a Telecaster. This is the standard guitar. It's a standard Mutt Dog right there. Hello, Mutt Dog. And this is my pedal board. It looks big and fancy, and I guess it is. My dog is licking my ankle, and I appreciate that very much. But what I like about this rig is, even though it's all wired up and crazy, if I had this guitar, this amp, and this speaker, and these pedals, I can make lots of sounds. So, I'm gonna show you. And I think I've probably demoed this pedal board before, but I mean, it is just a beautiful thing. So I'm gonna see if putting this, I know my finger's in front of the camera, so I'm gonna put it over here and just see. And I'll just be here. Hi. Let me flip this around and see if it'll do it for me. It won't. Okay. So we just have this here. So now I've got it set on 2 watts. 2 watts. That is about the least amount of wattage you can have for an amplifier to make sound and still sound decent. Nevertheless, it sounds like a telly, you know? And that means, when I say telly, that's short for a Telecaster. And even though this is not a Fender Telecaster, this is a Whitfield Telecaster. Charles Whitfield makes these guitars, Kentucky. Now, so that's really quiet, like conversational quiet. Like, I can talk, but you can still hear me. That's quiet guitar, and that saves my old ears, saves LB's ears, and allows me to play in a small studio, which is just about the only place you work these days. A small studio. Someone's backyard like this. Like a garage. Somebody's house that's been converted into a studio. Because the music business is kind of dead. It's up to individuals. That's why I'm on Patreon with you. Because I am running my own show. And I love it. Not everybody loves it as much as me. So, I'm out here working. And with the Telecaster, for instance, here I can do, these are the pickups. They're like the microphones of the guitar. This one is by the bridge, and that means it's going to have a brighter tone, okay? You know, so it's like that. Keith Richards. Okay, and then the neck pickup is a darker sound, so it's more jazzy. Characterized like Jimi Hendrix, you know. And so then this position is both of these pickups on, which is sort of just like you would imagine, in between. Now, sometimes that would be characterized by like a Steve Cropper kind of sound on like a Stax record, a Otis Redding, you know, record, or Sam and Dave, Booker T and the MGs. And of course, let me get a pick. The bridge pickup is that, you know, like Green Onions. You know, there's that. kind of thing. That's how he does. But then if you put it on the neck pickup and turn the tone knob down, has a volume and a tone knob, then it gets a very jazzy. You know, and in between is a real classic soul. And then the bridge, turn the tone back a bit. This is like Vince Gill, for instance, great Vince Gill. He'll play his guitar only on this pickup and turn the tone knob back a hair, so it's always just sort of a warmer sound, and that describes a sound that isn't too bright and jarring, a warm sound. And that's why we use amplifiers with tubes in them, valves in them. It's an archaic technology, but when sound hits a tube electronically, it does something very musical that digital gear doesn't do. Digital will reproduce what you put into it exactly like you put in it, but it doesn't give anything back. I hope that makes sense. So I've got the Telecaster and the pedal board. So I'm going to start with just adding some reverb. So here's the dry sound. So it just goes blank and cuts off. I'm going to add a little bit of reverb, spring reverb, which is not a seasonal commentary. Rather, it's a technological springs. The spring reverb has actual metal springs in it, and it makes the sound go spring. So here's some spring reverb. Here's a lot, so you hear what I'm saying. See what I mean? So, and that's like a surf, you know. Surf. So I'm going to turn that back a little bit. And so I've got that's just the guitar, a reverb, and the amp. So classic effect is tremolo. So tremolo has a trembling sound, and so this would be like good for soul music. Sort of an emotional sound to it. So now I'm going to add a little compression. And this is a very subtle effect, but when you're recording, for instance, and your guitar has a little bit too much low end or too much high end, or certain notes are sticking out in the mix, you want to smooth it out, and a compressor will make the louder bits quieter and the quieter bits louder and even it all out. So here's my sound without a compressor and with a compressor. It's very subtle, but so I use that quite a bit just to smooth out my sound. I have an equalizer, which is a tone control, and I have a Boss equalizer that's been modified by a company called JHS. I bought it used that way. It was already a used modified pedal, and what that does is the modification allows you to use the Boss pedal without it creating so much hiss. The original Boss circuit is a cool circuit and a good idea, but it was designed using cheaper components to save money by the manufacturer. So you have someone put in a few nicer resistors and other electronic parts, and it gets quieter and sounds better. It's more high fidelity, hi-fi. So I'm going to just use what I usually use it for, which is just simply to brighten up my sound in a session or make it have more presence. So here's my tone, and here's my little brightened up tone. And then that's a 3,000 hertz, 3K boosted slightly, and then a 1.5K boosted is a good presence for guitar. So that's a simple way to make your tone stick out in the mix a little bit more. Now the other thing would be, okay, overdrive. That's really just what it sounds like you're overdriving the amplifier, so it makes distortion, but you're not creating too much fuzz distortion. Just more of a make your guitar louder and have more sustain. And my dog has an overdrive on his throat as well. So now this is a Nobles, Nobels ODR1, and it's a you don't see them that much out in the world. You usually see an Ibanez tube screamer. That's the popular one. Stevie Ray Vaughan used it and popularized it very much. I like the ODR1 by Nobles because it makes my dog bark so beautifully. It has a wide range of tone, and it makes your guitar sound like a cool guitar through a loud amp. So here's my clean sound, just through the amp with the reverb. And then here's a little bit of overdrive. So now without it. So, and also, that's not, I use the overdrive sparingly. I try not to make it sound too artificial. For instance, my little amp over there can just be turned up louder. But when I'm in a recording session, I just want to get to the sound quickly because things are moving fast. So, clean sound, overdrive sound. So, you quickly go from to like Ziggy Stardust, Okay, so we've covered the guitar, the amp, and the reason I run that little Fender Champ through that Sears speaker cabinet with a 4-ohm Celestion is because a bigger speaker has a wider range of tone and a higher headroom, so I can just be more flexible with that big speaker. However, I have used the tiny 8-inch speaker, which is very small, in that Champ amp on about 50 albums, and people have never said to me when the final product came out, gee, that guitar sounds small. So, for instance, really famous guitar, rock and roll guitar and blues guitar has been done on Champ amps. Joe Walsh and the James Gang, Eric Clapton and Derek and the Dominoes, Keith Richards and the Rolling Stones, Jimmy Page used a tiny amp on the first Led Zeppelin record. Okay, those are pretty famous big sounds. Now people have gotten real into I've got to have the same 100-watt Marshall and 8 12-inch speakers that Jimi Hendrix had at Woodstock, but he was on a stage in front of 500,000 people, and the sound system was barely adequate for that job. So he needed an amp that would just be loud as hell. I don't need that. So here's another extreme version of distortion, and that is a fuzz. And that's where I thought of that because I just said Jimi Hendrix. So I have the fuzz pedal, an MI Audio Neo Fuzz. They don't make them anymore, but I bought it not because they're rare or they're not made anymore. I bought it because I love that pedal. It's very flexible, and it does the fuzz thing. So I have it before a volume pedal so that I can have the full effect of the fuzz going at whatever volume, because fuzz is not really that subtle. It can be, but usually it's not. So this is my general sort of fuzz. So remember, this is a Telecaster that sounds like this. Now it sounds like this. It's very fuzzy. So, and that fuzz pedal will do lots of different things. I want to get too geeked out on it for you. But okay, now I'm going to get into, I've got this Line 6 M9 pedal that I said this in a video before. Some guitar players sort of snob out on this M9 because it's this digital pedal that does all these multiple things. So it's a jack of all trades, master of none. However, it does have a really nice delay, which is an echo. So I'm using just the digital delay, but it has tone knobs, so I can. So here it echoes. Now I'm going to do a classic sort of dotted eighth note echo. So this would be like your. So it works. I mean, you know, it does the delay thing. I've also got like a vibrato in there, which is so similar to a tremolo, but it's more the pitch, you know, so I can turn that speed up and I can get almost like a Leslie, like the speaker of an organ. Or, you know, Tom Petty. So that's a cool sound. Now, phase shifter, this is sort of a classic like Waylon Jennings. Somebody told me when I first came to Nashville, son, you finally got it made. Sort of a swirling sound. The Stones use it some, so it'd be like Some Girls by the Rolling Stones. And a lot of Little Feat stuff. Got a slide here somewhere. In fact, I have an 11 16 inch Sears socket wrench, just like Lowell George. And Lowell George would do a lot of compression and overdrive, and he'd play stuff like. So, you know, as you can see, I've spent a lot of time at this pedal board making it make these sounds that are on all these records that I've got in my record collection and in my little brain here. So, okay, here's another thing this thing will do. It does this automatic volume pedal thing, so it's almost like a pedal steel. I don't need to use the volume pedal in case I'm walking around a stage or I just can't sit there and put my foot on a volume pedal over and over again. I can do this kind of and put some extra reverb on it, like a bigger reverb. So. So that's pretty cool, and that's when you start to get into atmospheric kind of stuff. So I have the reverb pedal I have, which is an Alexander Pedals Space Race. That's what it is. If I have that particular volume pedal swell going, I can put a lot of reverb on it, and I can make it very spacey and atmospheric. So. Compression on it to make it a little evened out. High octave reverb. And I can put a big delay on there too, instead of and use my own volume pedal and create even more sort of, you know, soundscape kind of stuff, you know, like I mean, that's pretty amazing that I can just make all these sounds with one Fender guitar, a tiny little amp, and a speaker cabinet from Sears Roebuck, and some pedals that you could just go buy at Guitar Center. So it's a matter of finding out what sounds you are trying to get, and that will morph over time. So there was a time when I just wanted to get like the sound of a clean guitar through an amp, and maybe some delay on it, and maybe some distortion. So that's what I had for years. I had a tuner, I had an overdrive or a distortion pedal, and I had a Fender amplifier. And that did me well, because the Fender amp had reverb and tremolo, so I had all those effects just in that little setup. I could stick the pedals in the back of my amp, put my guitar in its case, put the cables in the guitar case, walk into a gig with an amp and a guitar. But as time went on, I wanted more sounds, so my pedal board grew, my collection of amplifiers and guitars grew. As I started doing studio work, all of that grew even more. And so when people walk in here and say, God, why do you have so much stuff? I'm like, well, number one, I like to make sound. Number two, when I started working on recording sessions, the producer would say, hey, bring a 12-string electric, a 12-string acoustic, a baritone guitar, a banjo, a mandolin, a Les Paul, a Strat, a Telecaster, and a Gretsch. And you'd be like, okay. And then I'd get on the phone and call my friends and say, can I borrow a 12-string electric? I'd borrow all that stuff. And then I'd show up with all of it, and the producer and the artist would be happy, and they'd call me back for the next record. So between the time of that session and the next time, I would start trying to find something I could afford that was like a 12-string electric, 12-string acoustic, baritone guitar, banjo. And then I learned to play those instruments better, because guess what? I had one at home I could practice. Now, not everybody can just do this like I do, but the only reason I do it like I do is because I spent so much time doing it. And I admit, it wasn't because I was so hardworking. I became hardworking when the thing that I loved to do anyway proved itself able to pay my bills. In other words, I became a professional music maker. So I love to play guitar on recording sessions and with great artists like Emmylou Harris, Rodney Crowell, Todd Snyder, etc. But it also feeds my own creativity. So when I write a song, it's not only fed by the words and the melody and the chords, but it's fed by the opportunity to create the sound that I'm hearing in my head. So part of this is like being kind of letting yourself be a little bit of a crazy person. I was reading something the other day about people who write books, like fiction writers and prose writers and poets, and it was talking about how they take whatever trauma's been in their life and attempt to process it over and over again through the written word and the language. Like you're searching for gold, you're mining, you're digging down into your own brain and your soul, trying to find the answer to a question that you have. Well, music's the same way, but it's probably more fun to go searching than it is to sit at a word processor or do they even make those anymore? Sit at a computer or with a notebook or at a typewriter and be by yourself and only hear click, clack, click, clack. I'd rather ponder the infinite universe and make beautiful. So you see, it's very my relationship with the guitar is very physical. Like, when I want to shake the guitar to get more vibrato, I'll shake the neck. I don't care. I'm not going to break it off. And if I did, it would be a bad guitar to own. This is a great guitar. So you can hear all the versatility in a Telecaster guitar. And that's why it's so famous. It's a utilitarian device. So, Steve Cropper, James Burton, Bruce Springsteen, Keith Richards, Roy Buchanan, Danny Gatton, me, everybody in Nashville, we have Telecasters because they do it all. So do other guitars, a Les Paul, a Stratocaster, a Gibson ES335, a good Gretsch. They can do a lot, but nothing that covers as much ground as like a Telecaster. And I bet if I threw it across the room, it wouldn't be broken. It might have some chips of paint out of it, and some scratches, and be out of tune, but I could tune it back up and keep playing the session or the gig. And so I can take this guitar, that tiny amp, and optionally the speaker that will expand its sound a bit, but I don't have to have it, and this pedal board, and take maybe an acoustic guitar, and I can cover so much ground. I can play rock and roll, country, blues, gospel, folk, country, rockabilly, punk rock, maybe not metal, but I bet I could fake it, and I bet it would take a real metalhead to hear that I wasn't playing like a metal guitar, like a pointy guitar. So anyway, I'm just saying that it took me all these years and buying all this gear to figure out that all I needed was this. Ha ha! So pursue your passions. You don't have to buy everything in the store. I did that over the course of 3 decades as a professional, questing after sound. Some of this stuff I would have long ago gotten rid of, but nobody wanted to buy it. So 5 years later, I dug it back out and used it on a record, and somebody was real happy about it. So anyway, I love to make sound and create songs and perform and play. And I have a playground out here in which to do it. Thanks for being my patron. I hope you get something out of these things. I get something out of them just talking about it. And so let me do the footwork for you. Get a good Telecaster. Get a good Fender amp. Get a few pedals that are strategic to what you want to do. And then play every day as long as you can. All right? And have fun. Talk to you soon.